use this money for experiences, use this money for time with your family. Obviously, we can't get any sort of time back. So that's just something where the light bulb tends to go off where they say,
welcome to the Live Greater View, a financial planning podcast produced by VLP Financial Advisors that discusses life, money, and perspective. We help clients live their best life at every stage through our VLP Live Greater partnership process. Thank you for tuning in. All right, well, welcome back. I'm Rose Price, a partner and certified financial planner here at VLP.
And Chris Malone, CFP and partner and advisor at VLP.
So, Chris, interesting topic we're going to talk about. We're talking about travel in retirement and kind of how the whole planning process works. One of the statistics that we came across through Transamerica Centers for Retiree Studies is that 60% of retirees plan for travel.
Yeah, absolutely. And if we think about it, every time that we see our clients, usually we get together twice a year, we're always interested to see how retirement's going. And that naturally follows on how have your trips been, how have vacations been, how's your family doing? All the things tend to intertwine. This is a big focus for clients, obviously, as they turn to that next chapter.
Yeah, absolutely. So I thought this part of this podcast, we would talk about some of the experiences we've had with our clients and how kind of the planning process works with budgeting and how we put that in there.
Yeah, for sure. And, if you look up on the internet, things to do during retirement, travel is a big one. I just feel like there's so much context that we can add through experiences over the years, the do's, the don'ts, everything in between. We'll tell, some stories and just make for a good conversation.
All right. Well, great. Well, why don't you kick us off?
Well, first things first, there has been a clear shift in priorities of goals that we've seen with clients over, I'd say, the last 10 plus years. We've seen a shift of people going from wanting to buy things to wanting to purchase experiences. This is something that's happened overall throughout the country, but it's been very clear even within our business where 10 years ago somebody would want to buy a car, potentially a vacation home, jewelry, sort of these items. And now with the prevalence of Airbnbs and stuff like that, there's been a shift, to travel and experiences.
Yeah, and I think we also hear of the conversation is, my kids don't want any of my stuff.
Yeah.
That was one that comes up a lot.
Yep.
So a lot of times they're looking to downsize, and it's all about what can I do with my family? What is that opportunity? And, one thing that Bruce always says is, if you pay, they'll come. So that becomes like a budget item line is, hey, if we're going to have this vacation, it's a lot more. It's not just them and their spouse or, a lot of times it's the extended family that gets in there. So the number can sometimes get pretty big.
Yeah, for sure. And if you think, 10 plus years ago, this was more of an intensive process of organizing trips, getting hotels, sort of all of these things. Now with Airbnb and VRBO and everybody getting comfortable with using both of those platforms, I mean, it's so easy. You can go on there, say, I want to go to a beach, a lake, any sort of amenity, and it's right there at your fingertips.
And not even that is when you book that, the host comes back and says, what do you want to do? We'll even book those things for you. So it really has kind of changed the face of travel. Now, travel agents still come into play. There's lots of different, we'll talk about some of the ways our clients do travel, but it is interesting how that whole dynamic's changed, and it's really, really been fun to watch.
Sure, and I think when we're having conversations from a planning perspective about, okay, here's where you are, here's where you're going, and we show what asset values are worth today, but then we can also show what they're worth 10, 20 years down the line and show what sort of spending trajectory clients are on, and we say, hey, look, you're going to either have a lot of money at the end of the plan, or you can spend it between now and then. Please go out, use this money for experiences, use this money for time with your family. Obviously, we can't get any sort of time back. So that's just something where the light bulb tends to go off where they say, well, I have all this money, I need to go ahead and experience it and spend it on travel.
Yeah, so that goes back to the line I always tell my children. I said, you're going to get love, education, and memories. So part of that is, and my kids love that, and they take it to heart, especially my oldest because she loves to travel, is, hopefully they feel they've been loved, but education, want them to go to college, but it's all about how can we spend time together, and thankfully, if you have the means and the ability, and also we see with our clients who travel, they tend to have they're more happy. They have something to look forward to, something to do. So, again, getting back to kind of the planning, this we often pull out as a separate goal. Because we want people to, think about, I have this budget, this money is there to do the travel. And it's been interesting. We're putting together different clients have different scenarios where we run that. We have some clients where they actually want a physical travel savings account that each year we're pushing money into, because psychologically, if it's there, they can spend it. But if they have to call for it, it doesn't always happen. So it's really interesting. When we'll talk a little about how in the planning, what we've seen clients do, but how that psychologically just having that number listed and talking about it gives them the freedom to really just kind of book that and know that experience is waiting.
Right, for sure. And just to think about how we structure plans, typically in our Money Guide Pro software, we'll start with needs. These are things that obviously you need for everyday living, wants in the middle of the road, and then wishes. We are big proponents of making sure that we have travel as a priority under wants broken out separately from needs. Let's say we have a client that's spending $10,000 a month on everyday living expenses. We say, please do not put your travel in that sort of
or your medical,
top line, or medical or stuff like that. And it's so helpful when we go back to clients and we say, hey, we've budgeted for all of the everyday things. You're fine. We still have this money sort of walled off for travel because we want them to feel good about taking those trips. We want them to be incentivized about actually having fun and think about travel separately from all of the other, routine expenses.
It's the permission thing, right?
Exactly.
They need the permission to spend the money, and it's there. So, and I think that's really important to talk about. And so we'll talk a little about just, how we kind of help approach that with clients. And next we'll kick off and some common mistakes we've seen and maybe some tips that some of the listeners will find valuable.
Yeah, for sure. So if we think about from a planning perspective, if we have travel built out separately, that's obviously step number one. That's so important for, the psychological reasons like we talked about. The second thing to note there is it's truly different from client to client. And what I mean by that is every client tends to travel differently from a cadence perspective, or they think about it differently. So let's talk about that.
Yes, it is really interesting. You have clients who want to have one big annual travel, some who want to travel just in the U.S. We have a lot of clients who are in the government who spent years living overseas and traveling, and they go, I'm done. I want to go see the U.S. So, how does that look? What does that look compared to someone who wants to spend more time traveling international? And if they tend to go international, they're usually going for weeks, right? It's not a 3-day visit to go out to Yellowstone or anything like that. They're going to New Zealand and they're going to block off 3 weeks. So there's a lot more different, and then you have clients who want to travel every month or every quarter. And that just comes with, all right, what's that going to look like? Is it going to be international as U.S.? Is it a mix? And then what are all the pieces that you're going to need to think about if, what's this trip going to look like? Is it involve planes and ships and boats and, or is it you're just going to be in the U.S. and you're renting an RV and you're doing that cross-country thing that you always talked about? And those come with different, cost measures, right? And we'll talk a little bit later about insurance and some experiences we've seen with some clients. But definitely thinking about what is that going to look like? And we have a lot of times, we talk about with clients, I say, when you typically retire, you're typically the youngest and healthiest you're going to be, right? Because every day we're going to be a day older. We start to slow down as we get older. So we talk about, hey, it's okay you're going to be years you spend more on travel. And let's talk about that. Do you want to travel heavy and international for the first 5 to 10 years? You're going to spend more money doing that, and then you're going to taper down. Do you want to do a big trip with the family every other year? So it's really, I think the best part about it is having these conversations is then you can really build that plan and talk about how that's going to look and feel and work. Right,
and it's customized to them. And like a lot of things that we do from a planning perspective, there's not necessarily a right or wrong answer. It's just different from situation to situation. So that's great. I would say I have the fair mix of clients that do have an annual budget. I also have plenty that have bigger trips every couple of years. A lot of times they'll have, kids and grandkids, and they'll say, hey, every 2 or 3 years, in some situations they're scattered across the country. I want to have everybody get together in one location. I know it's a heavy lift to ask for that annually, but every couple of years I want to pay for that. That's something that's important to them. So just an example of how that actually looks on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, absolutely. I've had to that exact point where I have an interesting client. She likes to do every couple of years a trip where she brings all the family together. And then she has 9 grandchildren, and she takes each one of them somewhere they've never gone each year. So she rotates through. So it's really an interesting dynamic and it's also one-on-one. So we have to budget, kind of separate. On top of that, she has her own travel she likes to do. So, and in that case, we break those goals out. So we have the family travel budget where that's something that she earmarks. She wants to see that number and know that's what I think that's my budget. That's what I'm going to spend. And that kind of dictates for her where that travel may end up being. Then she has her travel with the one grandchild. And then again, there's, varying things. So I think what's really interesting is there's no right one way you have to do it. It's, what's important. And I think the fun part is when we have these conversations, it gives clients that opportunity to think about what are the things I want to do? What would that look like? And, the fun, the interesting thing from our planning software and our perspective is we can run those scenarios side by side. What if you do it this way? What if you have it that way? I think that's pretty key. But again, to the point, it's fun to kind of see those scenarios play out. I've had a client who we knew she was never going to run out of money. There was just no chance. But it was an interesting dynamic, and their family didn't really talk about money. She gifted money to her kids. No, her kids didn't know how much money she had, and she struggled with, wanting to see the kids more. And I said, you know what, you have all this money. Book a trip every year where they can never afford to take themselves, and you guys go.
Right.
And they did this for years, 10, 15 years. And the cool part about it was it became like this fun thing. Like every year they'd be like, oh, we're thinking about doing this, this, and this, and this. And every year I would get a gift. I would get a postcard from wherever they went.
Oh, that's great.
Hey, we're here. They're always picking out a little house or something anywhere, which I never bought. But it was fun to just see them have that experience and something they've carried on because their mom ended up passing away from cancer. And I think the good thing, one of the things that came from that was they relished all the memories they had as a result of having this travel budget. And this client was a perfect example of somebody who wouldn't have given herself the permission to spend the money because money was a topic that they didn't really talk about in their family if we didn't do the planning. If we didn't do the planning, she'd understand how everything, where she had asset-wise, she had enough income, and that this money, she had the free will to spend up to, this amount or more.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's a great story. And, I thought it'd be good for us to talk about some of the trends that you've seen. So that's, we talked about the cadence and that sort of, that sort of angle. What other trends have you seen recently over the last handful of years, either post-pandemic or just in general, that you think are, here to stay?
There was a lot of pent-up travel after the pandemic. And some clients were paralyzed, right? That, for health reasons. Because again, you are probably typically we are the healthiest and youngest we are, given some scenarios where you might have an illness or a surgery or something that comes along. But clients were a little bit older and having to get back to thinking about, is it safe to travel again? That was a big concern. Yeah. And then once it was safe, where did they want to go and how is that going to look? Because part of it is also if you're going to go to certain, if you're going overseas, you go in countries, can you do the big hikes? How many days do you want? How long can you walk a day? What kind of tours do you want to do? Do you want to be on a ship? Do you want to? River cruises are very popular because it gives them the opportunity to get out and see different sites every day, but sleep and keep going down to the next port. So that's been interesting. More and more of our clients tend to use less. There's a mix. Our older clients don't tend to use a lot of Airbnb. They're still more in the hotel, working with the travel agent scenario. We do see kind of our pre-retirees that look more into are starting to kind of ease into that more Airbnb. And I think it's just a comfort level.
Sure.
But it's definitely been something that I've seen that since the coming back from COVID. Was first of all that pent up demand, and then they travel, and then they want to take some time off. So, and what about you?
So I think the biggest trend that I've seen is just the pickup in clients that are cruising.
Yeah.
This is something where obviously it's been around for forever, but just recently it seems like a lot of the cruise lines are sort of starting these satellite, smaller, more exclusive entities.
Yep.
Oftentimes they're more expensive. And clients love it. Even clients that, said they would never cruise or it's just not for them or they, tried it when they were younger and they didn't envision doing it in retirement, all of a sudden, we'll get together and they'll say, hey, we did a great trip in Europe and it was all, exclusive and we saw everything, didn't have to think about all the logistics of hotels or Airbnbs and stuff like that. So that's something where that's really picked up over the last
Alaska
handful of years.
is a big one too.
Alaska too.
Alaska is one, I think almost every retiree takes the Alaska cruise trip.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where, with the lines themselves, a lot of times clients will try, a line. They'll say, "Hey, great, liked it." Other times say it wasn't for me. I'll try another one, and go from there. So that's been a big thing.
Yeah, so that's interesting. Let's kind of shift into some of the common mistakes, because one of the things we'll talk about, an experience a client of mine just had, and I think it's kind of important to highlight it, is the travel insurance. A lot of times, you get through, you're finishing your booking, and you're like, $1,000? Like, why do I need to pay $1,000 for travel insurance? But I think in some instances, if clients traveled before COVID and then after COVID, they're more inclined to get the travel insurance.
Right.
And reason being is, if things happen, if you can't because you have an illness, you have a family emergency, those things started to pop up. Recently, I had clients who were on a cruise over in Europe, and the husband went into heart failure. So thankfully, they had the travel insurance. I mean, he had to be taken off the boat in a hospital in Spain for 5 days. And then the concern was stability of flying back. How was this going to get paid for? What was covered? And this is a very trying time. They, the wife got to stay in a hotel. They put her up close by. They're in the hospital. They don't speak the language. So this was, interestingly enough, that insurance coverage was there the whole time. They got her hotel. They sent in a translator when needed, and most importantly, they arranged for all the travel back and a nurse to the United States.
Wow.
So when we think about it, the part that really stood out to me that I brought home from that was, we tend to just disregard that insurance, but this was a scenario where an illness came upon that wasn't calculated for, expected, and without this insurance, this could have been $40,000-$50,000. This would have been a very expensive cruise.
Sure. Yeah, and if you think about it, it's a perfect storm. You're traveling. Oftentimes you're walking. More than what you usually do, dehydrated, the whole nine. So it's one of those things where great takeaway. I would say I've had experiences where clients come back and they say, "Hey, we did a 10-day excursion." And they're like, I did not think I was going to be walking 2, 3, 4 miles a day. And they're just wiped out.
Yeah.
So my takeaway from that was, hey, had a great time, but maybe think about that angle of giving yourself a little bit of a break, planning some of the excursions out a little bit further apart, and just taking that into account.
Yeah, and that's a great point. A lot of times we have that conversation when they're traveling. If some of our clients have a group they travel with or friends they travel with, and is everyone in the group going to be able to keep up? I talk about we went to Italy a few years ago, and we were hiking, and I would joke to my friend, I'm like, these stairs are not ADA compliant. One stair can be 4 inches, the next could be 3 feet. So you have to kind of ask the tough questions when you're booking, and when you're booking yourself and you're doing your own travel and you're booking your Airbnb, do some research, because I think as you mentioned, clients seem to they underestimate how much it's going to be. The travel is going to be different than their everyday to day life.
Yeah, for sure. And something else that comes to mind under the don't section is, don't find yourself in a situation where you're thinking about traveling and you're putting some sort of framework around how often you're going to do it, but don't actually follow through with it. What I mean by that is, planning this stuff out takes work.
Yep.
And the most successful and happiest clients that we have, they tend to either plan their trips at the end of the year or at the very beginning of the year for the entire year. Yeah. And they just sort of get that heavy lifting out of the way. And then their trips just roll on from the spring, summer, and fall. And it's really important to do that.
Yeah, I see clients that, and it's also something for them to look forward to, right? Yeah. It's something for them to say, oh, my next trip's going to be here. I'm really excited. I'm going with this friend, or we're meeting these friends on this cruise. Mm-hmm. It definitely gives them that opportunity to kind of, budget. And, they have that budget now. They can say, how am I going to deploy this? Do I want to take 3 big trips, 4 big trips? Do we want to do mini trips? But absolutely. And I think that kind of goes hand in hand. What's your if we talked about being sick, but make sure you have your emergency contacts listed.
Yeah.
If something does happen, who's going to watch the dog while you're gone or feed the cat, and who would be the call if something goes wrong, or because we tend to have to leave. Certainly, if we're traveling overseas, you're going to be gone for a while. Who's going to get the mail, those kind of things. So all that planning and having that done kind of in advance, when hey, these are going to be what I'm going to do this year, or at least a guide of what you think you're going to do. You need to have that backup plan in place also, and get who's going to take care of the things at home.
Yeah, for sure. Something else that I think is worth talking about too is just the fact that when you go through this effort to plan these trips, oftentimes you have family, if you're older and you're making these memories with their kids or grandkids, you get back and you say, well, we had a great time. They say, well, can I see, pictures, or what do you have to document?
Yep.
And, inevitably somebody will pull out their phone. That's great. But it's sort of just like the hodgepodge of what people, took at that time. We've had clients that come back with these beautiful Shutterfly books. And,
great gift for the holidays to the family.
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah.
So just wanted to mention that. They're really well done. Everybody gets one. And it's just a great way to document, the trips and document the memories.
And so one of the things, we do when we go on our trips is we do a shared album. So everybody in the group can drop pictures in. So that makes it nice. So it's not just the pictures you took, it's what everybody took, because, well, if we're being honest, my kids don't want any of the pictures I took. So we need somebody else who's got better pictures. But that's one of the things I do every year. Any big trip that we take, everybody gets they have their standard Shutterfly book.
Yeah. So it really cool. We've had clients bring their books into the office and show us what their assets are going towards. So that's just a great nugget there. Yeah. So great. Well, I thought it would be fun for us to talk about, like, over the years when you look back, when clients share their experiences with you, what are one or two that really stand out that you say, wow, that's awesome. I'd love to do that one day?
So one that we've talked about the Alaska cruise, and a lot of clients do that and they really enjoy it. I think one of the bigger ones recently, and a lot of clients have done in the last couple of years, is an African safari. So this has been interesting. And again, that's one you're going to go for a couple weeks and you have to kind of plan. And you definitely want somebody to plan that one for you. You're not Airbnb in that one. Yeah. But the African safari, I think, has been an interesting one where a lot of clients enjoy you can do this in different experiences. You can have the stay at a hotel, go in. Mm-hmm. You can do the whole camping kind of on the safari reservation kind of thing. But it's really been one that I haven't heard anyone say, I wouldn't do that. That wasn't awesome. Yeah. So I think the African safari. Now, that's going to be a big budget item. So when you're planning on something to that extent, this isn't going to be a $5,000, $10,000 trip typically, unless there's just two of you, but it's going to be an expensive trip.
That's awesome. One that comes to mind for me, a client had a major anniversary where they rented a house in Italy for about a month. They paid for their kids to come over and stay for a couple of weeks. They paid for, grandkids were obviously there, their friends, family. And when you look at that, it's just really, really awesome to me to be able to do that for everybody and bring everybody along. House had a pool, beautiful, and it was actually, relatively inexpensive, for what they were getting. So that's something where it resonated with me and said, wow, that'd be something I'd love to do one day.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's lots of options and opportunities. I mean, I think what's really been fun from our perspective, getting to do this job and do the planning, is getting to see all the places the clients have visited. Europe's definitely a popular one. New Zealand, Australia, again, another great one. We actually have clients who spend almost a month in Mexico, which is really interesting. So yeah. But the big takeaway is the options are endless, and the question is making sure that you have that in as a line item, it's a budget and something that you get to this is a resource you get to use, because I think it is exciting for clients to be able to take this time and to spend with family or friends and be able to really leverage all the hard-earned money they worked for.
Yeah, for sure. And the client that I referenced that had a trip to Italy, I just remember they had the Shutterfly book also, but coming back and you see they had all generations in one big picture.
Yeah.
You're like, wow, that's what it's all about. They had a chef come in, make dinner, and then at the end of dinner, they all took a picture.
It's all about making memories.
It was awesome. Yeah, it was awesome. So great. Well, Rose, I feel like we covered a lot. Hopefully, we sprinkled in some nuggets that were helpful, some do's and don'ts of travel. As always, to our listeners, thank you for tuning in. If you felt like this was useful, please feel free to pass this along to friends and family. And thank you for tuning in.
Thanks again.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Live Great Review. If you like what you heard, please subscribe to our podcast on iTunes or Spotify and recommend our podcast to family and friends. To learn more about VLP Financial Advisors, please check out our website at vlpfa.com. Thanks again.
And now for our necessary disclosures. Securities and advisor services offered through Cetera Advisor Networks, LLC, member FINRA SIPC, a broker-dealer and registered investment advisor. All investing involves risk, including the possible loss of principal. There is no assurance that any investment strategy will be successful. The views stated in this podcast are not necessarily the opinion of Cetera Advisor Networks, LLC, and should not be construed directly or indirectly as an offer to buy or sell any securities mentioned. Due to the volatility with the markets mentioned, opinions are subject to change without notice. Information is based on sources believed to be reliable. However, their accuracy or completeness cannot be guaranteed. Past performance does not guarantee future results.